The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly into the battle zone, a maneuver that most species considered reckless at best and suicidal at worst. But humans had never been most species. Admiral Kyung watched as her 50 warships materialized in perfect formation, surrounding the Reaver fleet that was attacking Harvest Point Colony. The enemy had been in the middle of bombardment, their weapons tearing through the colony's defenses. They weren't expecting anyone to arrive this quickly, and certainly not in this manner. "All ships weapons-free," Kyung transmitted. "Show them what happens when they attack our people." The opening salvo from the human fleet lit up space like a second sun. Missiles, railgun rounds, and energy beams crossed the distance between the two fleets in seconds. The Reaver's shields absorbed most of the damage, but the sheer violence of the attack got their attention. On the Defiant Hope, Captain Ji-won watched as her weapons impacted a Reaver cruiser. The ship's shields flickered but held. "Their defensive systems are strong," she reported. "We're going to need a different approach." The Reaver fleet, which had been focused on the defenseless colony below, turned to face this new threat. There were 78 Reaver ships against 50 human vessels. On paper, the humans were outnumbered and facing superior technology, but humans had never cared much about what looked good on paper. "They're breaking formation to engage us," Tactical Officer Bora announced. "Looks like they're going to try to overwhelm us with numbers." "Let them try," Ji-won replied. "All ships close to engagement range. Authorization code G1 Alpha 7. Ramming speed." Throughout the fleet, human captains received the code and understood its meaning. They were going in close, dangerously close, where the fighting would be brutal and personal. It was exactly the kind of combat that terrified the civilized galaxy. It was also exactly the kind of combat humans excelled at. The Defiant Hope accelerated directly toward a Reaver battleship, her engines screaming with effort. The enemy vessel fired, energy beams that would have vaporized a council ship, but the Defiant Hope's armor was built to take punishment. The beams scorched the hull, melting armor plating, but the ship kept coming. "Shields at 40%, reported the defensive systems officer. "We're taking heavy damage." "Hold course," Ji-won ordered calmly. She waited until the distance closed to point-blank range, then gave the order, "Fire everything." At this range, there was nowhere to hide. The Defiant Hope's weapons hammered into the Reaver ship's shields, overwhelming them through sheer sustained firepower. The shields collapsed, and suddenly the Reaver hull was exposed. "Boarding teams, go!" Ji-won shouted. Magnetic grapples fired from the Defiant Hope, locking onto the enemy hull. Breaching pods launched carrying Marines in powered armor. They hit the Reaver ship's hull and immediately began cutting through, plasma torches melting the alien metal. Sergeant Minjin was first through the breach, his squad close behind. They found themselves in a corridor filled with Reaver soldiers, tall beings in dark armor with weapons unlike anything in human databases. The firefight was brutal. Reaver weapons fired beams of energy that could punch through Marine armor, but human weapons fired solid rounds that could punch through Reaver soldiers. More importantly, humans were used to fighting in close quarters, in environments where one wrong move meant death. The Marines advanced through the ship, fighting deck by deck. When they ran out of ammunition, they used their armor's strength to fight hand to hand. When their armor was damaged, they kept fighting anyway. One Marine, his armor breached and systems failing, continued to hold a corridor even as the air leaked out around him, refusing to let the enemy pass until reinforcements arrived. Throughout space, similar battles raged. Human ships closed with the Reavers, trading hull integrity for killing range. It was a strategy that horrified military observers from the Council, who were watching the battle from their distant stations. No civilized species fought like this, accepting damage to deliver damage. But humans weren't civilized. Not by galactic standards. They were Deathworlders, and they had learned warfare in the most brutal school imaginable, their own history. Engineer June watched his displays with growing concern. "Captain, we're taking too much damage. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. Life support is failing in multiple sections. Can you keep the weapons online?" Ji-won asked. "Yes, but then we keep fighting." On the Freedom's dawn, Admiral Kyung coordinated the fleet-wide battle. She had already lost 2 ships, their crews fighting to the last before their vessels were destroyed. But the human fleet was winning. Slowly, painfully, they were winning. "Pattern analysis," Kyung ordered. "There has to be a weakness in their shields." The fleet's combined tactical computers processed terabytes of battle data. After several minutes, a pattern emerged. The Reaver shields had a momentary reset cycle, a split second where they dropped to almost nothing just before the ship fired its main weapons. "Got it," said her tactical officer. "It's a tiny window, less than half a second." "That's all we need," Kyung replied. She transmitted the finding to the entire fleet. All ships knew targeting protocol. Wait for the enemy to fire, then shoot back during their shield reset. Timing has to be perfect. It was the kind of tactic that required split-second precision and nerves of steel. It meant flying straight at enemy ships while they were shooting at you, waiting for exactly the right moment to return fire. It was also the kind of tactic that humans, with their faster reflexes and higher tolerance for stress, could pull off. Captain Jiwon watched as a Reaver dreadnought turned its weapons toward the Defiant Hope. She could see the energy building up in its main cannon, enough power to potentially destroy her ship in one shot. "Hold," she said calmly, watching the targeting computer count down. The crew was silent, trusting their captain completely despite the death coming straight at them. The Reaver fired. At the exact same moment, so did the Defiant Hope. The enemy beam struck their shields, dropping them to critical levels. But the human railgun rounds, timed perfectly, passed through the Reaver's moment of shield weakness and struck the hull directly. The Reaver dreadnought's armor cracked. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface as the rounds penetrated deep into vital systems. "Target damaged," Boris shouted. "Their main reactor is destabilizing. All ships focus fire on that dreadnought." Kyung ordered fleet-wide. Multiple human vessels turned their weapons on the wounded Reaver capital ship. Without its shields at full strength, it couldn't withstand the combined assault. Explosions tore through the massive vessel, and finally its reactor went critical. The dreadnought exploded, the blast wave damaging several nearby Reaver ships. The enemy fleet, which had been confident in its superiority, suddenly found itself facing an enemy that refused to die, that kept coming no matter how much damage it took. The Reaver commander, a being called Kalth, watched this from his flagship with growing disbelief. His fleet had conquered dozens of worlds, destroyed countless defenders. They had faced armies and navies from multiple species. None had fought like this. "What are these creatures?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "The database identifies them as humans from a planet called Earth," the officer replied, his voice shaking. "They are classified as a developing species, limited technology, should be no threat. Does that look like no threat to you?" Kalth roared, gesturing at the display where another of his ships was being boarded by human Marines. On that ship, the Marines had fought their way to the bridge. They burst through the doors to find Reaver officers desperately trying to activate their ship's self-destruct. The Marines didn't give them the chance. Meanwhile, even as the battle raged, human rescue ships were dropping to the planet's surface. They ignored the weapons fire, focused entirely on evacuating civilians. One transport ship took 7 direct hits getting through the battle zone, its hull glowing red-hot, but it still landed and loaded refugees before lifting back to orbit. Dr. Yuna's medical ship was filled beyond capacity. Injured Marines, wounded aliens, traumatized children, all of them needing help. She and her staff worked without rest, moving from patient to patient, doing everything they could to save lives. In the recovery ward, young Suri could hear the sounds of battle through the ship's hull. She was terrified, but when she looked around, she saw human doctors and nurses working calmly, efficiently, as if explosions outside were just background noise. A wounded Marine was brought in, his armor half melted, his arm badly burned. He saw Suri watching and managed to smile. "Don't worry, kid," he said through gritted teeth. "We've got this." The battle continued for 6 more hours. The Reaver fleet, seeing their dreadnought destroyed and their advantage disappearing, tried to break off and retreat. Admiral Kyung wasn't about to let them escape. "All ships pursuit course," she ordered. "We end this here. No Reaver ship leaves this system alive." The human fleet, battered and bleeding, gave chase. They pursued the fleeing Reavers through the asteroid belt, through the outer system, destroying them one by one. It was brutal, merciless, and absolutely necessary. These raiders had killed millions of innocent people. Letting them escape to attack another world was not an option. The last Reaver ship was the flagship, carrying Commander Kalth. The human fleet traveled through space at speeds that made even their own engineers nervous. Captain Jiwon stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope. watching the stars stretch into lines as they pushed their faster-than-light drive beyond its recommended limits. "Engines are running at 112%, reported Engineer June, his voice tight with concentration. "I can hold this for another 18 hours, but after that we'll need to reduce speed or risk burnout." "We'll be there in 16 hours, Juwan replied. "Keep pushing." Behind her, Tactical Officer Bora was reviewing intelligence reports that Officer Dayoon had transmitted from the council station. The information was sparse, but what they had painted a grim picture. "The Reavers hit fast and hard," Bora explained to the command staff. "They don't negotiate, don't warn, don't give any chance to surrender. They just attack with overwhelming force." "Sounds familiar," muttered one of the bridge crew, and several others chuckled darkly. The galaxy thought humans were monsters for fighting the way they did. Now they were about to see what real monsters looked like. In the medical bay, Dr. Yuna worked with her staff to prepare for what was coming. They had converted 2 cargo holds into emergency trauma centers, setting up surgical stations and stocking supplies. The ship's medical database included treatment protocols for 47 different species, and Yuna was reviewing all of them. "We're going to see injuries we've never dealt with before," she told her team. "The Reavers use energy weapons that cauterize as they cut. Standard treatment for burns won't work. We'll need to adapt on the fly." One of the younger medical officers looked nervous. "Doctor, I've never treated a Valerian before. What if I make a mistake?" Yuna put a hand on his shoulder. "Then you learn and you try again. That's all any of us can do. These people need help, and we're the only ones who can give it to them." Throughout the fleet, similar preparations were taking place. Marines checked their armor and weapons, running equipment diagnostics for the 5th time. Supply officers calculated ammunition consumption rates. Pilots ran combat simulations, practicing maneuvers they hoped they wouldn't need. On the Freedom's dawn, Admiral Kyung met with her senior officers in a virtual conference. 50 ship captains looked at her, their faces showing determination mixed with concern. "We're going in blind," Kyung told them honestly. "We don't know the enemy's full strength, their tactics, or their weaknesses. What we do know is that they've destroyed 17 colonies and killed millions of people. Our job is to make sure they don't kill anymore." "Rules of engagement?" asked one captain. "Protect civilians first," Kyung replied. "Everything else is secondary. If you have to choose between pursuing an enemy ship and rescuing survivors, you rescue survivors. Is that clear?" The captains nodded. This was why they had joined the fleet. Not for glory or conquest, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Dalvon system. What they found made even veteran soldiers feel sick. Serenity Vale's orbital space was filled with debris. Defense platforms had been reduced to twisted metal. 3 merchant ships floated dead in space, their hulls torn open. And everywhere there were bodies. Colonists who had tried to flee in escape pods only to be shot down by the raiders. "Oh God," whispered Bora, staring at the tactical display. "They didn't even spare the escape pods." Jiwan's hands gripped the armrests of her chair tightly. "All ships, this is Captain Jiwan. Split the fleet as planned. Group Alpha will search for survivors. Group Beta will hunt for Reaver vessels. Remember civilians first." The Defiant Hope moved into a lower orbit, its sensors sweeping the surface. The colony's main settlement showed massive damage. Buildings had been destroyed or burned. The spaceport was a crater, but there were still power signatures, which meant someone might still be alive. "Prepare assault teams," Jiwan ordered. Full combat loadout. "Expect hostile contact." Bora led the first team down in a dropship, accompanied by 20 Marines in powered armor. The armor was bulky and intimidating, painted in dark gray with the Earth Defense Force insignia on the shoulder. Each Marine carried enough firepower to level a building, but right now they were focused on rescue, not revenge. The dropship landed near what had been the residential district. The Marines deployed, their armor sensors immediately picking up life signs. "Multiple contacts," reported Sergeant Minjun, some human, some alien, all showing signs of extreme stress and dehydration. They moved through the ruins methodically, checking every building, every cellar, every possible hiding place. They found survivors huddled in basements, hiding in maintenance tunnels, some injured, all traumatized. Bora's team reached a farmhouse on the edge of the settlement. The building was partially collapsed, but her armor's sensors detected a faint heartbeat below ground. She directed 2 Marines to clear the debris from what looked like a cellar door. Inside they found Suri and her mother. The little girl was unconscious, her lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Her mother was barely better, her eyes wild with fear and relief. "We're here to help," Bora said gently, removing her helmet so they could see her face. "You're safe now." The mother started crying, unable to speak. The Marines carefully lifted Suri and her mother, carrying them back to the dropship. Medical personnel were waiting, immediately starting treatment. Dr. Yuna met them at the landing bay. She took one look at Suri and started barking orders. "Get her to the medical bay, start an IV immediately. Check for internal injuries. Someone find out what happened to them." As her staff worked, Yuna examined Suri herself. The girl was severely dehydrated and malnourished, showing signs of early hypothermia. But she was alive, and that was what mattered. Suri's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Mom," she whispered. "Your mother is right here," Yuna told her gently. "You're on a human ship. We're going to take care of you." Are you the monsters?" Suri asked, her voice barely audible. The question stopped everyone in the medical bay. Yuna looked at the girl, then at her staff, many of whom had tears in their eyes. "Yes," Yuna said softly, "but we're your monsters." Throughout the day, rescue teams pulled survivors from the ruins. They found a total of 412 people alive out of 40,000 colonists. The rest were dead or taken by the Reavers. In one shelter, they found Director Hyuk still alive, badly injured but conscious. When the Marines found him, he was trying to protect a group of children, a weapon in his shaking hands despite his wounds. "Human ships?" he asked, not quite believing it. "Yes, sir," replied the Marine sergeant. "We received your distress call." Hyuk laughed, then coughed, blood on his lips. "Took you long enough." They loaded him onto a stretcher and carried him to the medical ship. As they lifted off, Hyuk looked down at the ruins of the colony he had built. The peaceful community that was supposed to prove humans could be gentle. On the Defiant Hope, Captain Ji-won received reports from all rescue teams. The numbers were horrifying. Entire families dead, children orphaned, communities destroyed. But mixed with the tragedy were the survivors, and that gave her hope. Then the scout ships reported back. They had found the Reaver fleet. Ji-won looked at the tactical display. The enemy was at another colony, 20 light years away, already beginning their attack. She could see their ships on the sensors, dozens of them harvesting another world. "Get me Admiral Kyung," she said. Kyung's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. She had received the same reports. "They're at Harvest Point Colony," Kyung said. "Population 60,000, mostly agricultural workers. If we push the engines, we can be there in 4 hours. Our ships are already strained," Ji-won replied. "If we push any harder, we'll have casualties from system failures." "Then we'll have casualties," Kyung said flatly. "But we will not abandon another colony. All ships, maximum speed. Engineering crews, I want every ounce of power you can give me." The fleet jumped back into faster-than-light speed, racing toward another battle. In the medical bays, doctors worked frantically to stabilize the survivors they had rescued. In the armories, Marines loaded weapons and checked their equipment again. And in a recovery bed, young Suri held her mother's hand and listened to the sounds of a warship preparing for battle. She didn't understand everything that was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. The monsters everyone feared had come to save them. Now those same monsters were going hunting. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 2 days after Serenity Vale fell silent. The chamber that had been filled with calm debate just months ago now buzzed with panic. Representatives shouted over each other, their voices creating a chaos that matched the crisis they faced. Council Speaker Thalan called for order, striking the ceremonial gong 3 times. The sound echoed through the chamber, gradually silencing the crowd. "We have received scattered reports from 17 colonies," Thalan began, his voice grave. "All have been attacked by unknown forces. Communications are disrupted. Early estimates suggest millions are dead or missing." A holographic display appeared above the council floor, showing a map of the affected sectors. Red markers indicated attacked colonies, spreading like a disease across the peaceful outer regions. Ambassador Minho stood in the human section, his face pale. Among the red markers was Serenity Vale, the colony that Director Hyuk had worked so hard to build. 40,000 people, most of them not even human, now gone. "We need to respond immediately," demanded a representative from the Valerian Union. Our fleet must be mobilized. Our fleets are scattered, replied the military coordinator, a four-armed being whose skin had turned gray with stress. Our ships are positioned to maintain trade routes and patrol established space. It would take 3 weeks to assemble a force large enough to confront this threat. 3 weeks? Someone shouted. How many more will die in 3 weeks? Intelligence Officer Daeun stepped forward, her expression professional despite the circumstances. She had spent the last 48 hours analyzing every scrap of data they had on the attackers. We're calling them the Void Reavers, Daeun explained, pulling up enhanced images from the few surviving sensor records. Their technology is unlike anything in our databases. They use weapons that disrupt our standard shield frequencies. Their ships are built for one purpose, overwhelming force. Where did they come from? Asked Thalin. We don't know, Daeun admitted. The attack patterns suggest they emerged from deep space, possibly from outside our galaxy. They show no interest in communication or negotiation. They simply attack, harvest resources and people, then move to the next target. The chamber fell into uneasy silence as everyone absorbed this information. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for 300 years. Conflicts were rare and always resolved through diplomacy. The idea of an enemy that wouldn't talk, that only destroyed, was incomprehensible to them. We must attempt contact, Thalin insisted. All intelligent beings can be reasoned with. We will send emissaries, they'll be killed. Minho interrupted, unable to stay silent any longer. These raiders aren't interested in talking. They're interested in taking what they want. You cannot know that, Ambassador, Thalin replied, but his voice lacked conviction. A new alert flashed on the displays. Another colony had gone dark, this one closer to the core worlds. The Void Reavers were advancing. We need help, Minho said quietly. Then louder, we need the human fleet. The chamber erupted into arguments. Half the council members shouted in agreement, while the other half protested violently. You want to bring the Deathworlders here? One representative demanded. You want to unleash those monsters on civilized space? Those monsters are the only ones who can fight, Minho shot back. While you've been maintaining peace, humans have been dealing with pirates, raiders, and conflicts on the Outer Rim. We know how to fight because we've had to. Admiral Kyung's hologram appeared in the human section. The commander of the human fleet in the containment zone looked tired but alert. She had been listening to the debate with growing frustration. Council members, Kyung said, her voice cutting through the argument. The human fleet currently consists of 50 warships positioned in the Outer Rim. As per your Resolution 447, we are approximately 3 days from the attack zone at maximum speed. 3 days, Thalin repeated, looking at the map. In 3 days, the Council fleets couldn't even finish assembling. But your ships, they're military vessels. Warships designed for combat. Yes, Kyung replied simply. That's exactly what they are. The debate continued for hours. Council members argued about jurisdiction, about the risk of allowing human military forces into civilized space, about whether this would set a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, another report came in. A fourth colony had been attacked. Daeun pulled up a tactical projection. If the Reavers maintain their current pace, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 weeks. Our fleets cannot possibly respond in time. Then what do you suggest? Thalin asked, though he already knew the answer. We send the SOS to the human fleet, Daeun said. It's our only option. The vote was called. It was close, much closer than it should have been given the circumstances, but fear of humans still gripped many council members even as their worlds burned. Finally, the result came through. The motion passed by a margin of just 3 votes. Thalin composed the message himself, choosing each word carefully. It was formal, cold, and included multiple clauses about restraint, proportional response, and council oversight. It was, in short, exactly the kind of diplomatic message the galaxy specialized in. The transmission was sent to Admiral Kyung's flagship. On the bridge of the carrier Freedom's Dawn, Kyung received the message and read it aloud to her assembled command staff. They're asking us to save them, her tactical officer observed, but they're still treating us like criminals who need to be watched. Kyung set down the data pad and looked at her crew. These were men and women who had volunteered to serve in the containment zone, knowing they would be far from home, isolated and untrusted. They had remained professional despite the insult of Resolution 447, had continued to do their duty even when that duty was to stay away from everyone else. They call us monsters, Kyung said slowly. They fear us because we come from a world that taught us to fight. But right now there are millions of people who need someone willing to fight for them. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, her face appearing on every ship's command screen. All vessels, this is Admiral Kyung. We have received a distress call from the Galactic Council. Multiple colonies are under attack by hostile forces. Civilian casualties are in the millions. The Council has requested our assistance. She paused, letting that sink in. I know what many of you are thinking. They pushed us away. They called us dangerous. They passed laws to keep us isolated, and now they want our help. Another pause. Here's what I think. There are children hiding in cellars right now wondering if anyone is coming to save them. There are families being torn apart by raiders who don't care about politics or prejudice. Those people don't care whether we're monsters or heroes. They just want to live. Kyung's expression hardened. All ships, battle stations. Set course for the attack zone, maximum speed. Engineering, I want every engine pushed to its limit. Medical, prepare for mass casualties. Weapons, load everything we have. Across the fleet, humans moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this, even if they had hoped it would never come. Warships that had been on patrol duty suddenly became what they were always meant to be. Instruments of war. Captain Ji-won stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope, watching her crew work. Dr. Yuna was already converting cargo bays into emergency medical facilities. Tactical Officer Bora was plotting attack vectors and analyzing what little data they had on Reaver ships. They're going to second-guess every decision we make, Bora said quietly. The Council will be watching, judging. Let them watch, Ji-won replied. We're not going there for the Council. We're going for the people who can't fight back. The human fleet turned as one, 50 warships accelerating to speeds that would be dangerous for most species. The crews endured G-forces that would render other aliens unconscious, their Deathworlder physiology allowing them to push harder, faster, further than anyone else in the galaxy. Ambassador Minho watched the fleet markers on his display, moving toward the crisis zone. He had spent years arguing that humans were more than their violent reputation suggested. Now he was sending them into a situation where that violence would be necessary. He hoped the galaxy was ready to see what humans could really do when they stopped holding back. 3 months had passed since Resolution 447 took effect. On the agricultural colony of Serenity Vale, life continued peacefully, seemingly untouched by the political storms that raged in the core worlds. Director Hayek stood on the observation deck of the colony's main administration building, watching the sun set over fields of golden grain. The planet Dalvon had been carefully chosen for colonization. Its gravity was comfortable for most species, its weather predictable and its soil rich and fertile. 40,000 people called Serenity Vale home, representing 17 different species living and working together. Beautiful evening, said Merchant Captain Vex, who had just docked his trade vessel at the spaceport. The insectoid alien's compound eyes reflected the orange light of sunset. You've built something special here, Director. Hyuk smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. We're trying to prove something, Captain. That humans can live peacefully alongside everyone else. That we're not the monsters they think we are. Vex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. I've been trading with this colony for 3 years. I've never seen humans cause trouble. The galaxy fears what it doesn't understand. Down in the farming district, young Suri ran through the fields, her laughter carrying on the wind. At 10 years old, she was too young to understand why some aliens looked at her with fear, why her family had moved to this distant colony instead of staying closer to Earth. She only knew that she loved the wide open spaces, the feeling of dirt under her feet, and the way the alien crops glowed faintly in the twilight. Suri, dinner time, her mother called from their small farmhouse. The building was simple but sturdy, built with materials that could withstand Dalvon's occasional storms. Her father was already inside, washing up after a long day in the fields. As the family sat down to eat, nobody noticed the faint flicker on the long-range scanner displays at the spaceport. The colony's defense officer, a young man named Taman, frowned at the readings but dismissed them as sensor echoes. Serenity Vale was far from any major shipping lanes. Nothing ever happened here. That was exactly what Director Hayek had intended. The colony had minimal defenses, just enough to discourage small-time raiders but not enough to appear threatening. Every decision had been made to show the galaxy that humans could be peaceful, that they didn't need weapons and warships everywhere they went. It was a decision that would cost them dearly. The first sign of trouble came at midnight. The communications relay station on the colony's northern continent went dark. Then the eastern relay, then the southern one. Within an hour, Serenity Vale was cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Director Hayek rushed to the operations center, still in his sleep clothes. The staff looked panicked, frantically trying to restore communications. "What's happening?" Hayek demanded. "Something is jamming our signals," Taman reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm trying to punch through, but the interference is too strong. I've never seen anything like this." "Get me a visual on the orbital scanners," Hayek ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the space around Dalvon. What they saw made everyone in the room freeze. Ships, dozens of them emerging from the darkness like predators stalking prey. They were massive vessels, their hulls black and covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to absorb light. They moved with purpose, forming a blockade around the planet. "Unknown vessels, this is Director Hayek of Serenity Vale Colony," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You are in violation of Galactic Council space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Silence. Then, without warning, beams of crimson energy lanced down from orbit, striking the spaceport. The explosions lit up the night sky and the building shook from the impact. "They're firing on us," someone screamed. "Activate the defense grid." Hugh shouted, but even as he gave the order, he knew it was hopeless. Serenity Vale's defenses had been designed to be non-threatening. They had 6 orbital defense platforms and a handful of surface-to-air batteries. Against a fleet of this size, they might as well have thrown rocks. Captain Vex's ship was still docked at the spaceport. The alien captain ran for his vessel, his crew scrambling to launch. "We need to get a message out," he shouted over the emergency communications. "Someone needs to know what's happening here." His ship lifted off just as another barrage of energy weapons struck the spaceport. Vex pushed his engines to maximum, dodging debris and weapons fire. His ship was small and fast, built for trade runs, not combat. But today it was the colony's only hope. He cleared the atmosphere and immediately saw the nightmare that surrounded Dalvon. The attacking fleet was even larger than the orbital scans had shown. Hundreds of ships, some as large as small moons, were positioning themselves around the planet. Vex activated his faster-than-light drive, but before he could jump, one of the massive ships turned toward him. A tractor beam locked onto his vessel, pulling him inexorably toward the alien warship. He fought the controls, but it was useless. As his ship was dragged closer to the alien vessel, Vex saw things that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Other ships were being pulled in, their crews taken. He saw cargo bays filled with people, civilians from other colonies all staring out with empty, terrified eyes. But Vex was lucky. Or perhaps the raiders were careless. The tractor beam had damaged his ship's power systems, and in the chaos of the battle, his vessel drifted free, dead in space, but unnoticed. He floated there, hiding among the debris, watching in horror as the raiders descended on Serenity Vale. On the ground, chaos reigned. The colony's defense platforms fired desperately at the descending dropships, destroying a few, but more kept coming. They landed in fields and streets, disgorging soldiers in dark armor who moved with terrifying efficiency. Director Hayek broadcast one final message, a system-wide distress call that he prayed would reach someone, anyone who could help. "This is Serenity Vale Colony. We are under attack by unknown forces. 40,000 civilians need immediate assistance. Please, if anyone can hear this." The transmission cut off as the administration building's power failed. In the farmhouse, Suri's father grabbed his family and ran for the cellar. It was a small storage space, barely large enough for the 3 of them, but it was all they had. He pushed Suri and her mother down the stairs and was about to follow when the door exploded inward. "Go! Hide!" he shouted, slamming the cellar door shut. Suri heard her mother sobbing, trying to muffle the sound with her hands. Above them, heavy footsteps crossed the floor. There were shouts in a language Suri didn't understand, then a terrible silence. Hours passed like years. Suri and her mother huddled in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the colony being torn apart above them. Explosions, screaming, the whine of energy weapons. Eventually the noises faded, replaced by an even more terrible quiet. Shuri's mother held her daughter close, whispering prayers that went unanswered. The temperature in the cellar dropped as the heating systems failed. They had no food, no water, and no idea if anyone was coming to help. In orbit, Captain Vex finally managed to restart his ship's auxiliary systems. He recorded everything he had witnessed, compressed it into a data packet and aimed it toward the nearest council station. It would take days for the message to reach them, but it was all he could do. Then he pointed his damaged ship away from Dalvon and jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving behind the ruins of a colony that had only wanted to live in peace. Below, in a dark cellar, Suri closed her eyes and tried not to hear the sounds of alien footsteps searching through the houses above, looking for anyone who might have survived. The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the peaceful planet of Valar Prime. Inside, representatives from 40 different species gathered around a circular table that glowed with soft blue light. The air was filled with the sound of worried voices, speaking in dozens of languages that were translated instantly by computer systems. Council Speaker Thalen stood at the center podium, his feathers rustling with agitation. He was old, even for his long-lived species, and his golden eyes held the wisdom of 3 centuries. But today those eyes showed something rare: fear. "We must address the human problem," Thalen said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "It has been 50 years since they joined our galaxy, and in that time we have seen nothing but concerning behavior." Ambassador Minho sat in the human section, his jaw tight. He was tired of these discussions, tired of defending his species to people who had already made up their minds. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, but it felt heavy on his shoulders today. A representative from the Delvin Collective spoke next, her tentacles waving in distress. "The humans come from a death world. Earth, they call it. The gravity alone would crush most of us. The weather patterns are violent and unpredictable. The oceans contain creatures larger than our ships. And the land," added another council member, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "Their land is filled with predators. On Earth, nearly everything either hunts or is hunted. The humans evolved in this nightmare, and it shows in everything they do." Minho wanted to stand to shout that they were wrong, but he knew it would only make things worse. Instead, he sat and listened to the familiar accusations. Thalen pulled up a holographic display. It showed footage from 6 months ago, when human patrol ships had encountered pirates raiding a mining colony. The battle was brief and brutal. The human ships moved with aggressive precision, targeting enemy engines and weapons with devastating accuracy. When the pirates tried to flee, the humans pursued them through an asteroid field that would have destroyed any other ships. "Look at how they fight," Thalen said. "No hesitation, no mercy. They boarded the pirate vessels and subdued the crews with violence that shocked our observers. This is not how civilized beings conduct themselves. They saved 300 miners that day." Minho finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Those pirates had killed dozens of people already. The human crews stopped them. "With excessive force," Thalen replied. "We have laws, Ambassador. Rules of engagement. Your people treat every conflict like a war." Another council member stood. "I have reviewed human history. Their planet has seen thousands of wars. They have weapons designed specifically to kill their own kind. What species does that? What kind of beings spend centuries perfecting the art of destruction?" Minho felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. "We also have art, music, literature. We explore, we learn, we create. You only see the parts that frighten you, because those are the parts that matter," Thalen said softly. "Ambassador, please understand. We are not calling humans evil. We are saying they are dangerous. Your very biology makes you threats. You heal faster than us. You can endure pain that would send other species into shock. You can function in environments that would be lethal to most of the galaxy." The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Minho looked around and saw fear in every face. Not hatred, but genuine terror of what humans represented. A vote was called. Resolution 447. All human vessels would be restricted to designated zones far from civilized space. Human colonies could remain, but their ships, especially military ships, would be quarantined to the outer rim of the galaxy. Minho stood to speak against it, but he already knew the outcome. The vote passed with an overwhelming majority. Humanity was officially being isolated, pushed to the edges of galactic society because they were too different, too dangerous, too much like the predators they evolved alongside. Far away, on the bridge of the warship Defiant Hope, Captain Jiwan received the transmission. She read it once, then again, her expression neutral, Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly, but she could feel their tension. "New orders," she announced. "We're being pulled back to the outer rim. All human patrol fleets are being reassigned to containment zones." Her tactical officer, Bora, looked up from her console. "They're benching us?" "They're scared of us," Jiwan corrected. She looked out at the stars through the main viewport. The Defiant Hope was a Titan-class destroyer, built in Earth's orbital shipyards. It carried enough firepower to level a city, but it had spent the last 5 years protecting trade routes and responding to distress calls. Dr. Yuna emerged from the medical bay, her face showing concern. "Captain, we have 14 ships in this sector. If we pull out, who will respond to emergencies?" "Council ships, presumably," Jiwan said, though she didn't sound convinced. "We follow orders, Doctor. Set course for the outer rim." The crew carried out their duties, but the mood on the ship was dark. They had spent years proving they could be trusted, that they were more than the violent savages the galaxy feared, and it had meant nothing. In his quarters, Ambassador Minho sat alone, looking at a photo of Earth. The blue and green planet looked peaceful from space, beautiful even. It was hard to explain to aliens that yes, Earth was dangerous, but it was also home. It had made humans strong, but it had also taught them to protect each other, to work together against threats. The problem was that the galaxy had never faced real threats. Most species had evolved on gentle worlds with mild weather and few predators. They had developed technology and society without the constant pressure of survival that had shaped humanity. They couldn't understand that humans weren't violent because they enjoyed it. They were violent because their world had taught them that sometimes violence was the only way to protect what mattered. Minho opened a communication channel to Captain Jiwan. Her face appeared on the screen, looking tired. "I'm sorry, Captain," Minho said. "I tried," Jiwan shook her head. "You did everything you could, Ambassador. They made their choice. Now we live with it." "They'll regret this," Minho said quietly. "Maybe," Jiwan replied. "But by the time they realize they need us, it might be too late." The transmission ended. Across human space, 50 warships turned away from the core worlds, heading toward the darkness of the outer rim. Behind them, the civilized galaxy breathed a sigh of relief, believing they had contained the monsters. They had no idea that monsters were exactly what they would soon need.